Hello, listeners. Welcome to AM Hot News Talk Radio 1240. I am Sabrena with Sabrena Realty, and I'm so excited to be here today. My husband and I, Mark.
Hello, Chattanooga.
We're here today. We're starting a brand new radio show. We're going to be talking all things real estate. We're going to be talking about hot things going on in the community. And we have a very special guest here today, and we'll bring him on here in just a few minutes. But for those of you who have been thinking about buying a home, just want to tell you today, there's never been a better time to buy a home. And I'll tell you why. Because rent costs are at an all-time high. So you don't want to be making your landlord rich, throwing your money away. You want to buy a home. Interest rates are at an all-time low. They're at a historical low. You can borrow so much money and pay very little interest, which allows you to buy more home. Home prices are stabilizing. We had seen an increase in prices for years, and now we're seeing prices stabilize, so buyers can still get a great deal on a home. And the mortgage terms are more clear now. It's easier to get a loan. And so that brings us up to our guest. We are so excited to have Bruce Dodd with People's Home Equity here with us today.
Yeah, well, how you doing?
Doing great, Bruce. Thank you for joining us
well,
today. You know this is history in the making. You are joining us on our very first radio show.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here for the absolute unveiling of the Sabrena show. I guess we don't even know what we're going to call this show yet.
Not yet. And we're thinking on it, but it's going to be all things real estate and all things community.
Well, and I think it's just such great timing because right now, when you turn on the news, you hear all kinds of stuff that sometimes kind of accurate, sometimes not.
Right.
Really wants to make it sound like the process is much harder than it is. But right now, we're seeing, the dollar goes a long way. We've seen house prices move up some.
Right.
But, they haven't jumped in our market like they have in some other places. We're seeing interest rates still, interest rates are so low, you can barely see them.
That's true.
And so, it's a great time to buy a house. And, I think folks are often really misled as to how hard they think the process is.
Right.
I think a lot of folks have some real misconceptions in terms of how much money they have to have saved up to buy a house.
Right.
They think their credit has to be absolutely perfect. If you think about it, the median credit score in the state of Tennessee is about 708. Well, most mortgage programs you can do if you're around 640.
Right.
So you can be, not quite 10%, but almost 10% less in credit score than the median credit score in the state. So, that says you can have lived a little life. You can have had a few things happen. So, things don't have to be absolutely perfect.
Well, I think the key before anyone starts the process, they need to find the right realtor and the right lender.
Yeah,
find the right realtor. They need to ask them some questions.
Sure thing.
They need to ask them, how long have you been in real estate? Are you doing this full time? What's your experience? Because that person's got to walk you through the process from the beginning to the end. And it's important, as you know, Bruce, there's a lot of things that happen during the real estate transaction that people don't even think of.
Well, if you think about it, often, when you get on an airplane ride and there's a little turbulence,
right?
That doesn't mean we're going to go crash into the ground because we have an experienced pilot who's going to get us down on that runway. It's the same thing when you're buying a house. There's going to be things come up. You're going to find some things wrong with the house that you weren't aware of when you do an inspection, or you're gonna run up against some issues. And so you just want to have somebody that this is not their first flight.
Exactly. They need to know how to really walk you through and be able to problem solve. There's a lot of problem solving to the process.
Absolutely.
A lot of it. You've got to have someone that's really determined and doesn't take no for an answer too.
Well, but if you think about it, the most important thing I think is to, you find a realtor, we certainly would suggest people will call you.
Exactly.
And you're going to sit down with those folks and you're going to find out what's important to them.
Right.
And then a lot of times people just are thinking that the mortgage process is just so awful. It's really not that big of a deal. I mean, to get a mortgage, you first of all have to prove who you are.
Right.
So you got to have a driver's license, social security card. That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Next thing you've got to show is how much money do I make? So you need your last 30 days worth of pay stubs.
And they have to be on the job for a while too, don't they?
Well, it really depends. We've got to show somebody's had a work record for the last 2 years. But let's say, for example, you've been in college or you've been in trade school. Then we can just show your transcripts. Most of the time, you have to be on the job for at least 30 days.
Right.
So that's not that long. So, and it just kind of depends, but so you just need, last 30 days worth of pay stubs, last couple of years tax returns, got to show last couple months bank statements to show how much money you have to put down. That's about it.
Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned college student. For a college student that's just graduating, let's say that they have student loans.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect the buying process?
Well, it used to be a little different. Now what's occurred with student loans is even if loans are in deferment, which is for recent grads, a lot of times they're in deferment. You've got to take a small percentage of what that let's say, for example, somebody owes, $10,000 or that you take 2% of that is what the payment would be. So for a lot of folks, it's better for them to actually go ahead and get payments established and make that first payment versus being in deferral, because often that payment's going to be less than what the imputed calculation a lender is going to have to use.
Right.
FHA came out in September and said you have to start using 2% of the outstanding balance as the payment. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you're going to find the payment wouldn't be that much. So it makes sense for folks to do that. But that's just one of those things, it's as you were saying a second ago, you need to have somebody who is experienced as a realtor,
right,
to help you identify potential issues and determine strategies around those. The same thing is with a mortgage lender. And, I would tell folks, if it's your first time you're buying a house,
right,
probably not the best time to go to, internetlender.com.
Yeah.
Who is
not to pick on anyone.
Yeah. They're just, that's a great way to go for a lot of folks if they've been down the road before.
Right.
But if you haven't, you probably want to be able to sit down with somebody, ask them all your questions and help and have them identify any areas that are going to be potentially problematic for you and start going ahead and build some strategies around that. One thing we see a lot of times with people buying their first house is, and this is the best problem to have. If you're going to have a problem, this is the best one. Yeah, no credit. That's the best problem to have, because there's some strategies we could do around that.
Right.
And maybe we could talk about that on another show, but it's that's a good problem to have.
Right.
Because it's a lot easier to get you some credit when you ain't got none than it is to fix credit if you've already messed it up.
Right.
So starting over is no big deal. But for a lot of new folks, that's something. But I would just tell folks, the best thing to do is sit down with a local lender and bring all your documentation. If you call a lender and they say, take your information and pull your credit and ask you how much money you make, and they say you're now pre-qualified, you need to go to another lender.
Right.
If they don't actually look at your stuff, because that's pre-qualification is worth about the amount of time they put into it, which is none. Because a lot of times people have situations that that they're just not aware of as an issue. For example, I'm working with a gentleman right now. He has a full-time job, but last year in 2014, not 2015, but in 2014, he started a little business. Business didn't make it, shut the business down. Well, that's a problem.
Right.
Because we've got to look at certain things. There's ways around that problem, but you need to know that up front. And so if a lender's not looking at all your documentation and doesn't know that problem exists, it's going to rear its ugly head at some point.
Well, and for someone self-employed like that, they're going to have to show 2 years of taxes. You're going to bear a lot of weight on their last 2-year tax return.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So self-employed folks, it's a little more difficult.
Right.
It's not, it's the problem is often with self-employed folks that, without making this a political conversation.
Well, we can do that later.
But our tax code's so heinous these days that self-employed folks are often going to avail themselves of every possible write-off they can use.
That's true.
And so the only time you ever want to look like you make any money on your tax returns is when you're borrowing money for a house.
True.
That's about the only
You've
time.
got to show income for at least 2 years.
Yeah. So often folks will find that they've just used the tax code to their best benefit. Not saying anybody does anything wrong, but they're just using the tax code to their best benefit. And sometimes they can write off a whole lot more stuff than the average person can write off.
Now, let me ask you this. Let's say someone came to you, they're wanting to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And their credit's not the best. They've got the income. They've been on the job. Their debt to income ratio is within limits. Let's say they have some medical bills or something that's affecting their credit. Kind of explain how you can get someone ready and in position to buy that maybe isn't ready today, kind of what that process is and what you do for any potential buyers.
Sure. Well, if you think a lot of it, when we look at credit, is the awful 2 words, which is credit score. Unfortunately, I hate credit scores. I've been doing this 28 years, so there wasn't a credit score for a big portion of my career. But a lot of times now we're really looking at not what is the quality of somebody's repayment, but we're looking at scores. So if you look at credit scores were designed years ago when the credit card industry decided that they wanted to issue a credit card to anybody who could fog a mirror. So you're going to get a credit card. They just need to know how to price it. So they come up with credit scores. Credit scores are heavily weighted towards how you use credit cards. One of the number one things they look at for your credit score is what's your credit utilization. So if you have $1,000 credit line, how much do you have outstanding on that? So the first place we look, if somebody's got a credit score problem, is do we have big balances on credit cards?
That's not good.
Yeah. So you really don't want to owe more than about 30% of the line amount. So if you have $1,000 line on your credit card, you don't want to owe more than $300.
Yeah.
If we're applying for a mortgage. So that's one of the things we look at first. Often, if you have medical collections, that sort of thing, kind of once they're there, they're there.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can do. Sometimes paying them off actually can hurt you.
Really?
It depends on how old they are. Most of the time, it's very seldom you see somebody above the age of 35 that doesn't have a medical collection at some point.
Right.
Because let's face it, what happens is we get a bill from a medical provider, and the first bill we get's $600. And then insurance pays the money on it. Now it's $180. And then you get another bill, it's $90. And so sometimes, that process, while folks are waiting for things to work through, they kind of forget about it or whatever. And the next thing you know, they have a $45 medical collection on their credit. I mean, I see that kind of stuff all the time. Medical collections aren't a big deal.
Okay.
Unless it's just tons of them. What is a bigger deal with collections is, if you have a collection with a normal type credit provider, like somebody's charged off a credit card,
okay,
and they've now placed a collection, because that collection can now go to a judgment, which could attach to the property you're trying to buy. So sometimes when you're looking at those things, are we looking at a future lien? Actually, the credit bureaus have discussed really underweighting medical collections because so many people have them. I mean, me personally, I've had 16 joint operations.
Yeah.
Over the years, I got some medical collections out there, and some of them you got to try and pay it. I don't even know who this person was.
Right.
It's a doctor.
It changes hands quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's a doctor who came in when I was passed out and did something.
Well, let me ask you this: for someone who's gone through a recent foreclosure or bankruptcy or something like that, what kind of time frame are they looking at and getting ready to buy?
For most things, for bankruptcy, if there's not a house involved, normally you're looking at a couple of years. So once your bankruptcy is discharged, then 2 years after that.
Is that for any type of loan, conventional or FHA?
That's a good rule of thumb to use. So usually after 2 years of a bankruptcy, you're good to go. Now with foreclosures, it becomes a little bit more difficult, because what occurs is when somebody goes into foreclosure, it may show on your credit report that you were foreclosed on April 15th, 2010.
Right.
But when you look at when the property actually changed hands, it's sometime after that. And so we usually have to do some extra digging and look to see when the property actually was deeded over to the lender. So we'll go on courthouse records and we'll try to find out what that is. Because sometimes, back when things were really bad and there was a lot of foreclosures, sometimes it could take 6 to 8 months.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you think you're good, but no, you got another 6 or 8 months. Most programs, you're really looking at 3 years after a foreclosure. Some programs could be 4 years. Now, you'll hear that there can be allowances made for extenuating circumstances. I've almost never seen that work. So usually if somebody's going to try to do the program, people most typically are going to do after they've had a foreclosure is FHA,
right?
Because FHA is a little bit more forgiving. FHA does say if you go onto FHA's website that there can be some allowances made for under 3 years. But I've seen that in my career work once, and that was because somebody had to get foreclosed on because they had a child that had significant medical issues.
Right.
That's about the only one I've ever seen work. So typically it's going to be 3 years if you've had a foreclosure.
Something I encounter quite a bit, and you may encounter this as well, is there may be a couple that's gone through a divorce, and their divorce papers may say one thing, like, the husband's responsible of paying the 1998 van or whatever. But however, they're both on the loan.
Yes.
And so it doesn't matter what those divorce papers say, if that individual's on a mortgage or a car loan. Or something like
yes
that.
And no. Okay. Yes and no. It does matter. Well, let's talk about the circumstances where it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Let's say a couple gets divorced, and the one party is awarded the house, and they're supposed to make the mortgage payments.
Right.
Well, if they don't, and it's joint debt, your credit score is going to take the giant sucking sound in the room is going to be your credit score going down.
And that happens.
Yeah. So from a credit score perspective, you're going to take the hits there. Where it does matter who is awarded the debt is, let's say, for example, we have a mortgage or we have a car payment, and the husband is awarded the car and the car payment. It was joint debt. As long as they pay it on time, and they've been paying time for a long time, then you're not going to have the credit score hits. So your credit score is still going to be fine. And in a lot of circumstances with a divorce decree, we don't have to count that debt against them as long as it's been paid. If it's not been paid, then you're going to get the hits on your credit score. In some circumstances, we can exclude that.
Right.
That is like, for example, where I've seen some situations where we're able to do a loan for somebody that had a foreclosure. Was a situation where, say 2.5 years ago it was foreclosed. The property was awarded to ex-wife. Ex-wife didn't make the payments. And then I've seen
right.
that work if it's been a little while.
Right.
But, what I would say is if you're facing that situation, once again, it's not time to go to internetlender.com. You need to sit down with somebody and then they take a look at the paperwork. In our case, what we would do is when we have those kind of questions, we'd go ahead and have an underwriter look at it and just tell us what we're looking at before people spend, money on appraisals and home inspections and that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's important. You head it off before you start investing money. Now, for anyone that wanted to contact you, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Bruce?
Well, we're easy. First of all, and we love it when folks do this, stop by and see us at 6650 East Brainerd Road. We'd love to see folks. You can check us out at Chat Mortgage. That's chat with 2 T's, chatmortgage.com, or give us a call at 591-9801. You can send us a carrier pigeon, smoke signals. No, I'm joking, but
well, we're going to come back after the break, and we were really touting about those low interest rates.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, I would like for us to kind of delve into the different loan types and also talk about what the current interest rates are. And for anyone listening, you can certainly visit us as well, Sabrena Realty. You can go to our website at sabrenarealty.com, or we've got agents waiting to hear from you now. You can reach them at 423-499-7780. If you're thinking about selling your home or buying a home, call us at 423-499-7780 and join us after the break. Welcome back, and we're so glad you're listening to us today at 1240 a.m. Hot News Talk Radio. This is a new real estate program with Sabrena Realty Associates, and today we have Bruce Dodd with People's Home Equity in as our guest, and we have been talking about the loan process and the buying process and how there's never been a better time to buy a home. The prices are great. The interest rates are low. And we keep talking about how low the interest rates. Why don't you kind of give us some different loan types and what the interest rates are running right now?
Well,
Bruce,
you know, if you
explain what that means.
Sure.
In buying a home.
Sure. Well, the granddaddy of them all, the best loan program out there, it's the one that you have to earn. You have to earn it.
Right.
And that's a Veterans Administration loan.
Boy, they deserve more than
they earn it.
The loan.
Yeah, they earn it. They certainly earn it, and it's one of the ones we get happiest when we get to do. But rates are really low on those because the federal government essentially steps in and pays the loan off if the veteran runs into a problem and has to get foreclosed on. So there's less risk in it for a lender, and so those rates are in the upper 3% range. They're like 3.75, something like that. When we're quoting interest rates, we're supposed to quote APRs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you generally where rates are. These aren't APRs.
You can keep it simple.
We'll make it kind of simple. So and then FHA loans are going to be very similarly priced. Conventional loans, the rate is a wee bit higher, but the reason why typically folks go that route is unless you're putting down 20% when you buy a house, if you're making a down payment of less than 20%, then there's typically something called mortgage insurance that has to go along with the loan. Conventional loans have the cheapest mortgage insurance, and at some point it goes away.
Now, doesn't your credit score have to be higher to get a conventional loan?
It does. And credit scores are, for conventional loans, it's risk-based pricing. So the higher your score is, the lower your pricing is. Typically, you kind of get the best pricing on a conventional loan if you're north of about 740. So that's when, conventional loan is going to be the least.
Right.
If you're north of 700, it's still pretty good pricing.
Yeah.
If you get below 700 on a conventional loan, the pricing is still good. And in today's world, it's still awesome, but it's just going to be a little bit more.
Right.
And often with those folks, we'll take a look and see if there's something we can do to get their score up a few points. Because like if somebody's at 718,
yeah, that's worth trying to.
Yeah, you get them a couple more points, and then their rate goes down a little bit. To me, that's the silliest thing in the world. There's no difference between somebody that's at 718 and somebody that's at 722.
Right.
There's just not a difference, but there's got to be some cutoff points. But no, what I would tell folks is right now rates are extremely low. If you looked at all predictions, everybody thought rates would be higher now. We've read about the Fed raising the short-term interest rates they give to banks,
right,
and thought that would have a corresponding increase in interest rates. Well, at the same time, then we've seen the stock market tanking, and so the bond market's been stronger. So right now, all the experts thought rates would be higher than they were last year. Right now, they're a little lower. I think that's probably a fairly temporary thing.
Yeah. What are you thinking about that? Are you thinking maybe this year we're going to see rates tend to go up a little bit?
Well, if I had a great answer for that, I think they will. But if I really could predict that with any accuracy, I'd be on Wall Street being one of the guys that, all the politicians are saying are messing up the country. So if I knew a way to do that, then that's what I'd do.
It's an election year. If they're smart, they'll keep them down.
Yeah. But I think that I think the markets really drive that. And what you're going to see, if you see the job numbers continuing to get better, if you see, if you see the general economy doing better, part of what's keeping interest rates down to right now is inflation's very low. Well, why is inflation low? It's because oil's $30 a barrel,
right?
And oil drives the price of just about everything.
Right.
Everything's got to get in a car and go someplace, most of the time. So when you see oil prices remaining low, we're seeing inflation remaining low. So that's, hence rates are staying pretty low. So all that said is, because we're probably lost a few people in that conversation, all I would say to folks is interest rates are smoking low right now.
That's right.
If there's an opportunity for you to do something, you may save yourself some money. If it's not the right time, it's not the right time just because rates are low. Time for you and your family to buy a house. But I think for most folks in this kind of environment, it makes sense to at least take a look at your situation and say, is now the right time? Let me get some information. Let me sit down with Sabrena. Let me find out, the house that I'd like to have. What's that cost?
Well, and we touched on this earlier, when you're looking at a 3.5% interest rate versus a 6% interest rate, and we're looking at a lot more house. Exactly. We're looking at a mortgage payment about $1,200. You're getting a lot more house with that lower interest rate. So it's a great time for anyone looking to buy. And, there's tax incentives too when you buy a home.
Sure. Well, and I think a big part of the reason why folks often don't jump in the market is they don't feel like they understand the process. And so you've got a solution for that. You got a seminar coming up.
Exactly. We do have a seminar, and we will promote this again at the end. But for anyone that's tired of making their landlord rich, because rents are at an all-time high, they're at a 15-year high. And you can take that payment that you're paying in rent and apply that towards a house and get more living space.
Sure.
And plus, you own it. So that's an investment. That's something that you can build equity on and sell and make money on one day. But when you rent, you get none of that back. There's no return on investment.
Well, yeah. And we're seeing right now, rent prices high because the one thing we've had a lack of in our market, especially here in Chattanooga, is it's been a very tight market from an inventory standpoint. Not at some points, we've not had as many houses as we need. So that would also say, if you've ever thought about selling your house,
call us.
Yeah, I mean, right now.
Yeah, the prediction is that this year that a lot of those sellers that were holding back and not putting their home on the market, just because of not being able to get the price they were hoping to get and stuff like that, we're going to see those folks that were holding back come on the market this year. And, sellers are going to have more competition too when that happens.
Sure. But, right now, especially if your house is under about, if you think you're going to sell it for less than $200,000.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I got a stack of people on my desk that have been pre-qualified that would like to buy that house today.
Well, with a median sales price of $155,000, when you're looking at a sales price of $200,000 or less, you've got a large market of buyers that can afford it and that are going to be available to buy the home. But for anyone that's been holding back, that may be thinking about selling their home, they should definitely call us and let one of our agents come out and assess the home and give a free market analysis and determine the value of the home, and also talk about some competitive commission rates we have. So not everybody offers that.
Yeah. Well, the thing too,
hidden fees or any administrative fees.
Well, and because all those things impact what your net result's going to be.
Absolutely.
It just does. But, if you think about it right now, if you've ever thought about selling your house, I hear folks say that, well, my house isn't ready to put on the market because I need to do a bunch of stuff to it. I'm telling you right now, if your house is between $150,000 and $200,000, unless it's just, I would have you take a look at it. If I would have you come out, take a look at it and tell me if I need to spend any money. Because a lot of times you don't.
Well, I will tell you, I very much use a conservative approach when I'm looking at a home to sell, because you can tell someone go in there and let's replace these Formica countertops with granite, and let's replace this flooring with all hardwood and stuff. And they will not get that money back.
Nope.
They will not get it back. So sometimes just decluttering, giving some curb appeal, some fresh paint, doing some very inexpensive things will transform a home and make it very appealing to any potential buyers out there. And so when we come out, we're going to use a conservative approach.
Sure.
Because we know that people are not going to get that money back if they go and invest a significant amount, just to sell the home.
Well, yeah, so to me, the idea then is if you've ever thought about selling your house, give Sabrena a call, come out and take a look at it, and let's see what you can get for it right now without doing a thing. You may not need to do a thing.
Well, they want to keep more of that equity.
That's right.
To invest in their next purchase. And that's where you would come in, Bruce. And, you and I are going to plan this big seminar. We're doing that. That's going to be March the 3rd. That's a Thursday. And it's going to be a lunch and learn.
And it's free.
It's free. And we're going to feed people too.
So you can come in.
Food.
You can eat. You can learn a little bit.
We're going to share all this vast amount of knowledge that we have.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be fun, but we're going to be talking to those first-time home buyers, anyone that's renting and they're tired of making their landlord rich. We're going to give them advice. We're going to start step 1 and walk them all the way through the process. And we're also going to talk to any seniors out there that are thinking about downsizing. They're thinking about selling their home. Maybe moving into a condo or a townhome or something like that, or a smaller home on one level. We're going to be advising them as well. So we're going to be talking to investors too. If you're an investor and you're thinking about investing in real estate, maybe buying a home that you want to flip or you may want to hold on to and rent it, this will be a great seminar for them as well. And we're going to have this at the Hickory Valley Retirement Center. It's going to be very conveniently located there in East Brainerd. Their address is 6705 Ballard Drive. And we'll talk more about that when we end today. But this is going to be a great seminar. And what have you got to lose? I mean, you're going to get fed. You're going to get all this great advice. And we'll be there. We'll have staff members there with us. We'll have other realtors there that can speak to everyone one-on-one.
Well, the thing is you can get some great information. It's not going to cost you a thing. And even if you think, man, I'm not sure that I'm really interested in buying a house, you may be able to come find out that the process is much easier than you thought, and it's something you want to do.
That's true.
Or it could be that you decide, no, it's not for me right now.
Right.
But at least you've got the information, so you're not sitting around wondering, I wonder if I could. So the what we all need in life to make business decisions, and we're making decisions around our home finances.
Right.
That's a business decision.
Exactly.
That's an absolute business decision. And all businesses, all good businesses, they get information on doing all kinds of stuff. Some of it they plan on doing, some of it they don't. But the only way to make good decisions is if you have the information. So here's an opportunity to get the information without having to spend hours and hours on the internet, trying to Google things. Absolutely. And trying to figure stuff out on your own. Plus, you get a little free lunch out of it. It's a nice place.
Well, and we keep saying now's the time, because we know in our industry that things are always evolving, always changing. There's new guidelines. There's always new things that we have to adhere to. And speaking of, I want to just really take a minute, brag on you, and you take an opportunity to tell people too, we have some new RESPA guidelines that came into play very recently.
Mm-hmm.
That's October of last year. And it has delayed the closing process. And what I'm finding with a lot of lenders is that where it used to take 4 weeks to close a loan, it may be 6 or 7 weeks now. And I know you have in-house processing and all that. So take a few minutes just to brag on people's home equity, because I have just been amazed and thoroughly impressed with the loans you've been closing for Sabrena Realty, because you've gotten them done on time when I'm seeing other lenders aren't able to do that.
Well, a lot of times when we think about a product or a service that we don't use a lot, we just take for granted that service from one company to the next is going to be pretty good. What we found is the federal government took a closing process that has been the same for 40 years and put some new disclosures in place and put some new timelines in place. Right. Now you have to be given a closing disclosure X number of days before closing. Typically it's 3 days. That doesn't sound like a big deal. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it sure has become a big deal.
It really has.
And so it's taken a lot of the larger lenders, it's taken them a lot more time. We're very fortunate that at our company, everybody who's involved in your transaction just works from my office. So we've got our own processing staff that's right here in Chattanooga that all they do is work on Chattanooga business. I have underwriters who all they work on is my business right here in Chattanooga. So, and my closing department's right here in Chattanooga. I think there may be one other company that has closing here, but I think that's about it.
Well, that's important.
Yeah, most of it is done in regional centers around the country. So if you think about it, your deal that's on somebody in Ohio's desk to process it or underwrite it or to close it, it's just a piece of paper. It's just a piece of paper. When you work with a small local company like us, I mean, I got to run into you in the grocery store.
Right.
I may have to see you at the Little League field. I may see you at church. I don't want to have to duck down another aisle because I couldn't close your loan on time. Versus, you know, I'm not going to say their name, but they're a big internet lender. They're based in Detroit. Well, you know, if things don't work out in Chattanooga, it's not that big of a deal to them. They've got a lot of other places to do business. For local lenders like me, you know, 100% of it is the experience that our clients have with us. I'm not a big bank. I don't have thousands of people walking through my granite filled lobby every single day. So we've got to get business done by taking care of people.
Right. It's a service.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so we take that very seriously. We actually do a survey of each client after we close, and we take a look at those results. So with People's Home Equity, it's not like this is just one of the things we do. Not knocking big banks, but if you go into a big bank, you know, the CEO of a large multi-state bank, he's not staying up tonight worrying about whether the Smith deal in Chattanooga is going to close on time.
That's a great point. You're absolutely right. You know, this is the service we're providing, and we're building relationships too.
Yeah, and it's all we do. So it's like if mortgages in Chattanooga don't work out for me, I got a real problem feeding my family. It's not like I can just go back to doing car loans or doing credit cards tomorrow. We've got a lot invested. The other thing is that I think you need to, if you run a local business and you're not spending your money with local companies, don't be upset if your business gets impacted one day. I know you do this. I do this. I know a lot of small business owners in Chattanooga do this. Is we do business with people in Chattanooga. Absolutely. I buy my office equipment from somebody in Chattanooga. I try to buy everything I can from somebody in Chattanooga because, you know, if you think about it, $1 that's spent in Chattanooga, according to the Chamber of Commerce, gets spent 7 or 8 times again in Chattanooga. Versus if we save a couple bucks and we buy something from some other place, well, then those dollars are leaving our marketplace.
That's true. That's a great point.
Yeah. So if you're a local business owner, you care about local business, you ought to be doing business with people here in Chattanooga. So I think that's important, and I know it's something I do. But no, I do think that right now there is a significant difference in the ability to get deals closed. The larger financial institutions now are typically 6 weeks. Well, a lot of folks would say, well, I don't really care. I don't necessarily have to move that fast. Here's why you should care, is that today, Sabrena, how many offers do you do where there's multiple offers?
Oh, that happens quite a bit in the current market.
Yeah. So if I'm a seller, and I'm seeing best case scenario, this person's going to want to close this deal 6 weeks from now, and this person can close in 4 weeks.
Exactly.
If their deals are the same, well, I'm going with 4 weeks.
Absolutely.
So, and the other thing too is I think there is a significant difference often because if you've got a pre-qualification letter from 1-800 Internet Loan Company versus a pre-qualification from a local company that realtors here know that they can count on, then you've got a better chance of getting your deal accepted that way too.
Well, that's true. And you're leading right into another key element that plays into the picture of dealing with a smaller company or someone local, and that's communication. You know, there's so many times that we'll go out, and if we're the second or third realtor that lists the home, you know, the seller says, oh, well, they put a sign in my yard and we never heard back from them. So communication is key. And one thing I've learned when you're dealing with a lender, when you're dealing with one of the bigger companies, they're always harder to get in touch with. It's always harder to get them to call you back and let you know what's going on. And with you, you know, I can just shoot you a text. I can call you. I can shoot you an email, and you're going to respond. And I mean, that really matters.
Well, I really can't imagine somebody not returning Sabrina's phone call. I just wouldn't want to be that guy later in the day. But
well, hey, Mark, are you still over there with us?
I'm still here. Bruce, I wanted to just remind all of our listeners that the period between getting approved for the loan and actually closing on the home, that's not the time to buy a car or go furniture shopping, and explain that.
Well, what happens is, folks, what you want to do is, after you apply for a loan, you want a status quo on everything. You don't want to change anything. It's a bad time to change bank accounts. I've seen people do that, because then we got to get all kinds of documentation. It's a bad time to let anybody pull your credit. If you're going to buy some furniture and you're going to need to borrow some money, then wait till after you have the house. Fannie Mae came up with what they call their quality initiative. And it's a requirement if I'm going to sell a loan to Fannie Mae, and that's where all good loans get sold. I don't care who you get your loan from. It's going to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or Ginnie Mae. They have an absolute requirement that you do a soft pull on that person's credit right before closing. What can get you is if somebody's applied for new credit, or if, you know, when they applied, they had a $200 balance on their credit card. Now it's $2,000. You know, those things can be a problem.
Exactly.
And so the best thing to do when you're getting a loan is to do absolutely nothing after you apply for that loan. And that's really important. One of the things, if you let somebody pull your credit, then I have to prove that you didn't get any, you know, financing. You didn't get any new credit, and proving a negative is like the hardest thing in the world. How do I prove that something didn't occur?
Right.
I can prove that it occurred. So I've jumped through all kinds of hoops. I'm going to have to make you jump through all kinds of hoops if you're the borrower. And so it's just a bad thing to do.
They just need to stay in constant communication with you, because really you're their friend in the business, and you're here to guide them through the whole process step by step.
Yeah, well, with us, I mean, you know, I can't feed my children by taking applications. I only feed my children when loans close.
That's right.
And my kids eat a lot. So it's important to make sure that, you know, you're working with folks who, you know, a lot of financial institutions, you got to work with a lender. That lender's getting paid whether your deal gets done or not.
Hey, Bruce, thank you. I mean, this is history in the making. You joined us today on our very first radio
Glad
show.
to be a part.
And I want to remind everyone to please come out March the 3rd, Thursday, to the Hickory Valley Retirement Center at 6705 Ballard Drive there in the East Brainerd area for our lunch and learn that will be held 11:30 to 1. We're going to be giving out all kinds of great tips and information and advice and feeding them. That's probably the most important part. But before we go today, I would like for you to tell anyone that's thinking about buying a home how they can get in touch with you.
591-9801 is the phone number. 591-9801 is our phone number, or you can check us out at chatmortgage.com or stop by and see us at 6650
And I
East
can
Brainerd
attest
Road.
that you do a great job. And for anyone thinking about selling or buying a home, please call Sabrena Realty Associates at 423-499-7780, or you can visit our website at sabrenarealty.com. And the key there is to spell my name correctly, which is Sabrena. And remember, we are licensed in Tennessee and Georgia. So it's a hot time, a hot market, a great time to sell. We will provide you with a free market analysis. We'll come out and make any recommendations. What have you got to lose by calling us? Again, Sabrena Realty Associates can be reached at 423-499-7780 or visit us at sabrenarealty.com. Thank you again, Bruce.
My pleasure.
With us today.